Hi folks, it's January 9th, 2020. 2020 I think is going to be an interesting and exciting year. I think there's a lot of new and exciting things coming. But I want to talk about a little bit older thing. Older and newer, actually. I want to talk about amateur radio a little bit today. Obviously you know that because you clicked on the title. This here is a handheld amateur radio. This works on 2 meters and 440. Or 2 meters and 70 centimeter. Those are two different frequency ranges or bands. I won't get into all the details of that right now. This video is about reasons why you should get an amateur radio license. There are, I'm trying to think, I think there's now only 3 classes of amateur radio license. Well, actually there's more than that, but technician, general, and extra are the classes you can take. Now the technician license is really pretty simple stuff. I believe it's a 25 or 35 question test. I'll put some links down below so you can go look into actual stuff. But I want to give you some reasons why you might consider getting your amateur radio license. And I know to a lot of people this might just sound like a geeky or nerdy thing to play with. I'll tell you what, I've met a lot of really interesting people on amateur radio, and I've built some really cool friendships out of it. Anyway, I'm going to go through 5 reasons why you should get your ham license. Number 1, emergency backup communication. Let me talk about that a little bit. I know everybody goes right to, oh, I have my cell phone, I can send emails, I can send pictures and all that. But the reality is if that cell phone infrastructure and or its supportive infrastructure, the internet, goes down, that communication device is just a piece of silicon in your pocket. That's all it is. It's not going to do you any good. Maybe a flashlight and a clock too. And a calculator. Okay, I'll give you that. But at the end of the day, you're not talking to anybody if that infrastructure's down. And that's something where amateur radio can come in and you can actually talk to people through different repeater systems, assuming that those infrastructure pieces are still up. And if that fails, you can talk to them directly. And then of course you can go on the HF bands and you can talk to people worldwide and coordinate and discuss about whatever disasters happen and how to rebuild and all sorts of stuff. Amateur radio has a couple different subdivisions, sort of, ARES and RACES, Amateur Radio Emergency Services and Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services. And those 2 units serve as volunteer functions as supportive infrastructure facilitating communication for emergency agencies, including FEMA, police departments, fire departments, and search and rescue. So there's a lot of emergency uses for amateur radio, and I'll tell you what, you can pick up a radio like this, Oshan, it's pronounced Oshan, it's spelled Waksong. You can pick up a radio like this. This is the KG UV8D Plus for about $100, and I can talk to people all over the Hudson Valley on this radio through our local amateur radio club repeater, and so I can get emergency communications if I need to. And I've used it, if you look back in some of my other videos, you'll see where I've used it a couple times when we've had big storms and power went out and internet was out, and I could call into the amateur radio repeater, ask one of my friends who still had power or internet what the storm was doing, how big the power outage scope was, all that kind of stuff. So it does have real value for emergency communications. Alright, I've rambled on about that enough. Number 2, to facilitate good communication skills. I think that's an important one. I've been to a number of get-togethers recently, and I've seen a lot of people talking over each other and not actually listening to each other. And I've run into a number of people in my life who they'll ask you a question, and before you even finish answering the question, they're talking over you again. Well, amateur radio doesn't allow you to do that. When you're transmitting, you can't be listening, and it's just like talking and listening. You're not listening if you're talking. And I don't know, I noticed that the amateur radio, the use of that has improved my communication skills tremendously, because instead of trying to respond to somebody and interrupting them, which I still do sometimes, I'm still working on it, but instead of interrupting them, I actually stop and I listen to what they have to say, and then I respond. And that's something that the radio kind of facilitates that I don't see in many other communication technologies in our society. A lot of times people are talking and they're not listening, and It's funny how those conversations go sometimes. Anyway, let's see, number 3, to meet new friends. I guess I mentioned that before, but I have met a tremendous number of interesting people. I've met people from all walks of life and all professions. I have friends who are carpenters, I have friends who are plumbers, engineers, down the list. It would blow your mind, some of the people I've talked to, especially on the HF bands. I mean, it's being able to jump around the planet and talk to people. There are some really interesting people on there. So it's a great way to build your friend base, and I don't just mean build your friend base like on social media, you know, so you can get more likes or have more people follow you. This is like real relationship stuff where you have people you can communicate with, and you can learn from, and I don't know, have a good laugh, and be able to ask questions of, and be able to answer their questions as well. It's a quality of communication that you don't find in social media, I'll put it that way. You're not limited to 140 characters, you know. Let's see. Learning radio basics. Yeah, that's another great thing about it. In order to pass your technician license, you'll need to learn some basic radio theory, basically. You'll need to understand radio on a certain level. And I think if you're walking around with a cell phone every day and walking around with all these wireless devices and you don't understand how they work, I think you should look into it. I think you should learn how they work and have some concept of what that is. And one thing amateur radio will let you do is learn about that, especially, particularly as you go up in the higher classes of licenses. You go up into the general or the extra class. You'll learn a tremendous amount of information about radio theory and capacitors and the mathematical formulas that go with all that stuff. It's fascinating stuff, and it just doesn't apply to amateur radio. It applies to all the technologies that we're using today, especially the cell phones, especially the wireless technologies, satellite technologies, just endless. So along with that, there's a whole nother section, that's number 5. In addition to just the standard radio stuff, there's also something called DMR. That's a digital version of radio, and it can be used over the air digitally, and in other words, it sends a signal that is digitally modulated. And so also, in addition to over the air, you can also connect those radios to the internet, and then you can network those radios together no matter where you are on the planet. So you have like radio, internet, and a connection between the two. So you can walk around your yard and talk to somebody in Europe on a little radio, even smaller than one of these. So that's an interesting field. The other thing you can learn about is satellites and GPS and how that stuff works. There's a whole bunch of different projects that go with that. And then on top of that, you can talk to the International Space Station, believe it or not. You can actually take a radio similar to this. There's a few details, obviously, that go with this. But you can actually have a conversation with the International Space Station when they fly over. So, 5 reasons why you should get your amateur radio license. It's not that hard to do. You can find a club in your area, I'm sure. There are often classes that you can take to help you pass your tech exam. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to pass the test so you can get your license and jump into it, it's not that hard to memorize the answers to the test. And you can go practice on a website called QRZ.com. Quebec Romeo Zulu, that's QRZ.com. And they have a whole testing session on there. You can go on and take the practice exams. If nothing else, do yourself a favor, go take a look at the technician exam for that. Just have an idea how difficult or not difficult it is for you. I hope someone finds this informative or interesting. If you have other questions about amateur radio, or you like or dislike this video, please like or don't like. Subscribe if you want to subscribe. Hit the bell if you want to get the notifications. You know how this goes. Thanks for watching this Pharmacy Seeds Network, and we'll see you in the next video.